Dennis, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
It has been a while.
It has. It seems like 2 weeks ago, but here we are back for Thor 2, I believe.
Yes, it's been approximately 8 months and about 40, 50 episodes.
Feels like it was just yesterday.
I know.
It really does. I was sitting on the other side of the basement back then. We've done some construction down here, and
You've upgraded.
My office has moved to the other corner.
The better corner?
We got a window in the back now.
Oh, that is nice.
Very nice.
This is why wasn't it better? In case anyone was wondering, I'm your host, Patrick Darms.
And I'm your co-host, Anton Paras.
Dennis Berscak is returning to the podcast after an extended hiatus.
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me.
Of course, happy to have you. Any updates for the listeners today, Dennis?
Oh, we're just running late and doing demolition, so okay. I appreciate you guys' patience, and again, thanks for hanging on tight. I apologize for my lateness, and glad to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We don't mind a little tardiness.
Yeah, no apologies necessary. We're excited to have you, and we have quite the movie to talk about today.
We do. So, listeners may recall Dennis was here for Thor, the Marvel film. So we decided to have him back for Thor 2, which is known as Thor: The Dark World.
This one, I was pretty excited for the first one. I'm not going to lie. The second one, not so much. And I'm here to tell you about it.
Well, we're excited to hear you talk about it. Yeah, this is nobody's favorite.
Yeah, I don't think I'm alone here.
No.
With as far as, movies go, it's, I mean, hey, it was arguable for the first one on why wasn't it better, because it was I thought a really good movie. Like we discussed, a few things could have made it better here and there, but overall I think we all agreed pretty good movie.
Yeah, we all liked it, and it was a good choice for the podcast, because even though we liked it, I think we're kind of in the minority on the first one. It's never really ranked highly when you look up Marvel lists. I've rarely seen it included in the top half of any list, and this movie for sure isn't.
And this movie makes it on different lists for the most part.
It does.
Yeah. Long story short, this one fits the podcast very easily.
Yes. I'll intro this for us. In ancient times, the gods of Asgard fought and won a war against an evil race known as the Dark Elves. Their survivors were neutralized, and their ultimate weapon, the Ether, was buried in a secret location. Thousands of years later, Jane Foster finds the Ether and becomes its host, forcing Thor to bring her to Asgard before Dark Elf Malekith captures her and uses the weapon to destroy the 9 realms, including Earth. Thor: The Dark World was released on November 8th, 2013 by Marvel Studios and Walt Disney Studios, directed by Alan Taylor, screenplay by Christopher L. Yost, Christopher Marcus, and Stephen McFeely, with an additional story credit for Don Payne and Robert Rodat. Starring Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Tom Hiddleston, Stellan Skarsgård, Christopher Eccleston, Adalway Akinoe Agabe.
Nailed it.
Kat Dennings, Ray Stevenson, Zachary Levi, Jamie Alexander, Rene Russo, Anthony Hopkins, and Idris Elba. The budget was $150 million. That is $200 million adjusted for inflation. And the box office was $644 million. That is $857 million adjusted for inflation. Interesting to see the inflation numbers after a decade.
Yeah.
I gotta say.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a lot of money, but it's a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. And this is not an old movie by any means.
Or is it?
Yeah. Maybe this is more an indication of the economic times.
Yeah, Anton,
sure. This is a comedy.
It
sort of
more. It went more into the comedy. That's for sure.
I mean, you were not telling a joke, but you had us laughing while reading the intro, and you were just reading straight facts about the story.
They were certainly relying on comedy in here to move things forward. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
We're not really sure what to do with this scene. Let's bring in Kat Dennings to crack a joke.
Punchline.
Now, I know where Dennis is coming from. If you read just the plot, like cut and dry,
baloney.
It's like what's happening here. It's all about the execution, right? You need the perfect team and the perfect execution to make this not sound crazy. Wow.
It's basically Norse mythology meets Lord of the Rings meets Star Trek.
Yeah. Beam me up, Scotty.
So why was this movie chosen? We were already teasing this. It's a natural continuation of covering MCU films. This was low-hanging fruit. This is an obvious choice. It's the second Thor film. It's the 8th film in the MCU, and it's the second in the studio's Phase 2 following Iron Man 3, which was released earlier in 2013. This is universally considered one of the worst MCU films. Very few fans speak of it highly. In fact, this is one of the rare Marvel movies where I don't know if I've ever heard anything good said about the film. I'm sure that it has its fans, but I've never actually really heard anyone defend it. If you are one of its defenders and you're listening to this podcast right now, please write in and tell us why you like it.
Chris Hemsworth is fuming right now listening to this.
I would love to hear that input.
I would love to have Chris Hemsworth on the podcast.
It's going to be Chris Hemsworth defending it. You know that.
He's welcome to. And just for the record, I don't hate this film at all. I don't.
No, and I don't hate him either. And actually,
no, he's great.
It's funny because most of the actors I am a big fan of, actually. Mm-hmm. If you go down the list, it's like all actors that I like their movies. I like, their body of work. And it's just funny because they all kind of came in. It was probably a great paycheck, but the movie itself seems like a disaster.
Well, I think above all else, the one thing that Marvel does better than probably any other series is casting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, have you ever seen a Marvel film with bad casting?
Yes.
Really?
I mean, if we've seen
besides Edward Norton and the Incredible Hulk, which barely counts.
It
counts.
I would say
it's an MCU film.
Now, as we move forward,
I would say, Pat, I know you haven't really delved into the most recent films.
Nor shall I.
And no, well, you got to take that back because we're going to have to cover them for the show.
I know. I
talk about low-hanging fruit.
I know. Dennis, I told you, I basically retired after Endgame. I was like, well, I'm good. I don't need any more of this.
It's, they're just making TV shows and, money grabs. Bunch of money grabs.
I take back what I said. For the most part, Marvel has casted its films extremely well.
Yes.
Until Endgame.
And I mean, we can even contextualize this, like, up to this point. This was still very early Marvel.
Yeah.
This was pre Age of Ultron. This is pre Thanos, and we have ourselves, casting after casting exceptionally well for these characters that are very strongly connected to the heroes that we know of Marvel, right?
Yeah, these are definitely, I mean, when they have the dark elves and the names that are just very forgettable, the characters' faces that are, all the bad guys look the same. It's just one of those movies that the bad guy, doesn't seem like a real threat to the end of the world, but they do at least, I would say, if there is a good thing about the movie, they tie in the whole ether and into the Infinity Stone and all that. So that's probably the only bow that is neatly tied on this bag of garbage.
And even then, I have questions about the ether, which I'm hoping Anton can address because he's pretty much a Marvel expert, right?
Yeah, well, lay it on me.
Well, I have them listed out in the notes. We'll get to it. Here's the interesting thing about this film. Doing the research for this, I was expecting bad reviews. It didn't get bad reviews though. 67%, not exactly amazing, but hardly terrible. So how did this film develop its bad reputation? It seemed to have happened over time.
Is there an age limit to those Rotten Tomato reviews? Because 13-year-olds might love.
I mean, it is a weighted average, and 67% it is not amazing. And obviously, I feel like we say this every podcast. Anton, Rotten Tomatoes score doesn't mean everything, but it's so universally recognized by anyone. Anytime you want to see a new movie, if you're kind of on the fence about it, you're almost guaranteed to check the Rotten Tomatoes score, and that might be the determining factor.
So is 67 the Rotten Tomatoes or the viewers?
Critic score.
Critic score. Do you have the viewer score?
Nah, I didn't write that down.
I don't respect the viewer score.
I could look it up right now, but I won't.
Fancier than that.
I do think this was an important film in the MCU, and hear me out on this. This is the moment that I think people realize that the MCU is going to be around for a long time, because this movie wasn't loved by anyone, and it still made over $600 million. It ensured that Marvel gravy train would continue regardless of quality. And that, I would say, that went on uninterrupted until about 2020.
Yeah, I feel like you saying that maybe we maybe we are being a little harsh, but I don't know. I feel like we're in the minority, but because so many people must have seen this movie for it to make that much money,
Oh yeah,
and it so having that type of review, it would be easy for it to be a bomb. With a lot of people seeing it, if they didn't like it, they would just give it a thumbs down.
it
It's easy to
outgrossed
do.
the first one by $200 million.
And it still showed that there was a very, very strong interest for the Marvel films.
100%. Dennis, I'm 99% sure I saw this with you and Tyler.
I was just thinking,
Yeah.
I couldn't remember because I was
Yeah.
thinking about that. I'm pretty sure I saw this with you in theaters
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
it came out and forgot it immediately as we walked out.
Yeah, I saw this one in college in theaters.
Yep.
Anton, did you have the same reaction I did? Because I didn't hate it when I saw it. I was like, it was fine.
I had it with the same like comic book lens of this is nothing like in the comics, but I guess it was fine.
Yeah, there
I
was nothing
remember,
offensive about it,
I remember laughing more than I thought I would because again the cheap punchlines, Kat Dennings, this back and forth, right? Even Chris Hemsworth has a few, but
There's some
yeah,
great jokes in this film, for
yeah,
sure.
they're easy. Again, with the low hanging fruit, they're just they set them up with the action, turn and look and cheesy line, and but it does break the tension, and that's probably, now that I think about it, why it got a good review overall, not a bad review.
Yeah, but the more I thought about this film and just kind of what it brings to the MCU, I feel like this was probably the earliest instance that we can think of where Marvel said, does this fit like a template that we can work for the future? Let's just kind of and we'll probably say something like this in the later in the episode, but the word placeholder comes to mind.
Sort of like was it Infinity War or Age of Ultron? I think it was Age of Ultron. That was basically like a similar, like, where are we going with this?
So this was right. Yeah, this
Oh,
was definitely before Age of Ultron.
but I know what you mean, Dennis. Age of Ultron, as big as that movie was, it was like, this feels like a side quest.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Like, can we get back on track with the Infinity Stones and shit? Like,
But it does tie in, right?
it
So
does.
it does, but it's like, did you need a whole movie for that?
Did you need a 2.5-hour movie for that?
Correct.
I don't know. Apparently, yes, because it made $1.5 billion.
But then they fixed it with a proper Avengers film with Civil War.
Right. Which is the best Avengers film.
And no one
It's
cares
not
that
even an Avengers film.
And
Right.
no one really cares that one really wasn't about the Infinity Stones. That was just a fantastic movie.
It was amazing. I actually want to cover that on the podcast, Anton, just for the sole purpose of I would love to talk about it, because that is my favorite Marvel movie.
It is just so fun. I mean, we can cover whatever we want.
That's true.
That would be better, and I would love to cover reasons why. So you will have to tune in for that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Before I forget, I want to tell you both my favorite joke from this film, because I don't think I wrote it down. And it made me crack up yesterday when I was watching this. When Thor returns from the Dark World and Selvig asks him about Loki, and he's like, Loki is dead. And Selvig's like, oh, thank God. And he's like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That got me.
Yes,
Oh,
especially.
thank God.
I thought you were going to say when Kat Dennings said, "How's space?"
No.
Selvig, they put him through the ringer in this one.
Yeah, they did. I don't know why he went crazy and Hawkeye didn't, because they were both possessed by Loki, but whatever.
Hawkeye's kind of a superhero.
Well, I was going to
Kinda
say it's probably because S.H.I.E.L.D. has a better like medical coverage for what intergalactic
He got therapy.
events. Yeah,
He has better therapy, better access to healthcare.
yeah. That goes with working on a government contract.
Yes.
All right, production history.
What do we got?
Plans for this film began back in April of 2011 when Marvel studio head Kevin Feige announced that the Thor sequel would be the first follow-up to The Avengers, which was released in 2012. All the way back in July of that year, 2011, Disney set a July 26, 2013 release date. Pretty bold considering they hadn't even begun pre-production. Now, that same month, Thor director Kenneth Branagh officially withdrew. Big loss there. Non-sarcastically. I wish he had directed this. The Los Angeles Times cited the long commitment necessary for a special effects-heavy epic and the pressure to start the script process right away as reasons for Branagh's departure, although he was initially interested in directing this sequel. Branagh later stated, quote, "It was a long time making the first film, and they were way too quick for me to get straight back into another, but it was a pleasurable experience and a film I'm very proud of," end quote. Marvel rehired Don Payne, the longtime screenwriter for The Simpsons. Now, he had previously worked on the first Thor film as well as Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, a film that I'm sure he's very proud of. Feige stated that the sequel would, quote, "take Thor literally to other worlds," end quote, and would be, quote, "primarily the journey of that character, of he and Jane Foster, and how the new dynamic with his father is working out, as well as where the broader stakes for the 9 worlds, realms, whatever," end quote. Brian Kirk was considered to direct. Now, his biggest prior experience had been directing several episodes of Game of Thrones. He got as far as contract negotiations before bowing out. Patty Jenkins then entered the picture. She had wanted to direct a superhero film, and previously she had been best known for directing Monster, for which Charlize Theron won her Oscar. Now, it's important to note that Natalie Portman lobbied hard for Jenkins to get the job. This is going to pop up later. This got far enough along that Marvel officially announced that she would be directing the film, and the release date was then pushed back to November 15th, 2013. But by December 2011, Jenkins was out, citing creative differences, and she later stated, quote, "I have had a great time working at Marvel. We parted on very good terms, and I look forward to working with them again," end quote.
So Jenkins felt she could not have made a good film because, quote, "out of Thor 2 because I wasn't the right director. I could have made a great Thor if I could have done the story that I was wanting to do, but I don't think I was the right person to make a great Thor out of the story they wanted to do," end quote. Jenkins had intended to create a film based on the premise of Romeo and Juliet, where Jane was stuck on Earth with Thor forbidden to come save her. After Thor eventually does travel to Earth, he and Jane would have discovered that Malekith was, quote, "hiding the dark energy inside of Earth because he knows that Odin doesn't care about Earth, and so he's using Odin's disinterest in Earth to trick him," end quote. An early version of Jenkins' plan was to feature Hela as the film's antagonist. However, Marvel Studios executive Craig Kyle explained that the studio's creative committee was driving most of the decisions for the film and did not want a female villain because they did not believe they could sell toys based on her to young boys. And this was the very same decision would, of course, later impact the villain in Iron Man 3. Now, she would, of course, end up directing Wonder Woman, and within days of Jenkins' departure, Marvel announced that Don Payne's script would be rewritten. At the end of the month, Alan Taylor, another guy best known for directing episodes of Game of Thrones, was chosen to direct the sequel. As Feige looked at what worked for the first Thor film and thought that he could retool from that, Taylor decided to, quote, "bring some Game of Thrones into it," end quote, in order to make a darker and more grounded sequel in comparison to Branagh's work in the previous film. By January 2012, screenwriter Robert Rodat was rewriting the script. Christopher Yost, Christopher Marcus, and Stephen McFeely had also contributed to the screenplay. Chris Hemsworth revealed that the film would have a more Viking-influenced film, elaborating, quote, "I think that the science fiction element to Thor, the danger is it falls a little bit into the world if it's tough to throw a light to. I think of big waterfalls and mountains and a Viking influence, where the Norse mythology kind of grew from. Having that in Asgard is going to make it all the more special, and that's what Alan Taylor wants to bring to it," end quote. Mads Mikkelsen and Benedict Cumberbatch were both in negotiation to play Malekith before Christopher Eccleston was cast. Principal photography did not begin until September 12th in Surrey, England, with additional shooting taking place in Greenwich and Stonehenge, as well as various locations around London. Studio shooting took place at Shepperton Studios and Longcross Studios. Production then moved to Iceland before filming officially wrapped up in December. Additional reshoots were held in July and August 2013, pretty close to the film's release date, which Marvel moved up 1 week to November 8th, and it ended up outgrossing the first film by nearly $200 million. And that brings us to Thor: The Dark World.
But first, a message from our sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Sprizzy. Looking to skyrocket your YouTube channel's growth? Meet Sprizzy, your video's ultimate matchmaker. Their tailored ad campaigns connect your content with viewers who are already looking for videos like yours. With Sprizzy, you're not just getting views, you're gaining subscribers who are genuinely interested in what you create. Are you ready to boost your reach? Visit Sprizzy.com today and let's launch your channel to new heights. Sprizzy, the smarter way to promote your YouTube channel. Gentlemen, time to talk about why wasn't it better. Number one, Natalie Portman.
Yeah, big reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should have had more Kat Dennings.
Sure.
I wouldn't complain. I mean, again, she did bring, I think, good comedic relief, but it's almost just like every time she's on, it's a punchline type of thing. So it's like, it is a little bit obvious that she's just there for a joke, and then see you later. She's kissing the guy, there for a joke. It's like everything she does is a joke. So I don't know. Good, bad, take it how you want it.
Portman was very angry about Patty Jenkins leaving the project. She's a huge fan of her. She really wanted to work with her. She lobbied for her to get the job. There is a lot of useful information on this subject that you can read about in a book called MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios, written by Joanna Robinson, Dave Gonzalez, and Gavin Edwards. If any of the listeners are into this kind of stuff and learning about the behind the scenes stuff going on at Marvel, this is a really good read that I recommend. Jenkins left the project because of all the studio meddling, which we're going to get to in the second reason. Like, the final straw for her was when she was given a new script, and I think rather astutely on her part, she suspected that it would be used to avoid hiring more female directors, and she didn't want anything to do with it. I kind of respect her decision for quitting and leaving on her own terms, because a lot of filmmakers would have taken the payday. I'm sure it was a lot of money that she walked away from.
And especially looking at all the reports, I mean, Natalie Portman did not take it well.
No. I feel like you can see it on screen. She doesn't look, let's say, engaged.
Yeah, not spiritually there.
I'm trying to remember a Natalie Portman line. Not there. What'd she do in the movie? She was like holding, she was playing with her drone sticks or like little, science thing for whatever. And I don't know. There was more talk about, it was more about Thor and, Odin talking about Jane and his love for her and how that drives what he's doing and him denying it than her actually being on screen doing anything. So.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't want to be there, and it showed. She has no chemistry with Chris Hemsworth. To your point, I can't think of a single line of hers in the film. Yeah, the only thing, she just, she fiddles around with some scientific equipment. She talks about space weather, and she literally stumbles into the plot of this movie, and I do mean literally.
I have a few questions, and when it's a Q&A session.
Oh yeah, we'll get to there. Yeah, I too have questions about the plot of this film.
I have questions about a lot,
and it's a shame because like Natalie Portman is a great actress. Like, I have seen her turn in great performances in a lot of films, but here she is so wooden, and I can't emphasize this enough, the lack of chemistry that she has with Hemsworth. Anton, I think you can probably speak to this more because I don't know the lore of the comics, but like, Sif, played by Jamie Alexander, is sitting right there. They seem to have chemistry. They sort of hint in this film that there's going to be a love triangle, but that goes nowhere.
Yeah, and I feel like that was maybe something where there were more scenes left on the cutting room floor that we may not see, because it does feel like that was a very half-baked concept in the film that hinted love triangle. And in the comics, yes, even now, like, Lady Sif is featured more prominently in the Marvels, or the current Marvel Avengers run with Thor. But all that said, I feel like this was even a step back from her portrayal in the first Thor film. And I feel like part of it was how the character was even written, because this film, I felt like it was very more damsel in distress versus someone that was more capable and really driving the story forward as an equal to Thor.
Yeah. Both of you mentioned Kat Dennings being the source of comedic relief. That was the obvious jokes. For me, I thought the real joke was Natalie Portman as a scientist. When she's fiddling around with all those gadgets, trying to dig up the ether and stuff, I found that more comical than any of the Kat Dennings one-liners.
Her analyzing all the portals.
Makeup perfect, flawless.
She always looks good.
Speaking of aging like fine wine, is she getting better looking?
Of course.
Yeah, like Jennifer Connelly. She's getting better looking.
I don't know what they got.
Money.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
They're in the right movies,
I think Portman was paid, what was it, like $5 million for this?
She was paid very, very
like, she doesn't, they didn't lowball her.
Well, she did have to deal with being, I don't know, injected with ether. No bueno.
I think that was CGI.
Oh.
Oh, crap.
Was it Christopher Nolan? He would have made her actually
Actually
get
would have
injected.
injected her.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, the thing is, we actually found a real ether, and it's going to be real. So
I've resurrected Albert Einstein, and he's whipped up some ether for us. So Natalie, get in the chamber.
I don't believe in using CGI, so I actually went out and found an actual reality stone, and we've liquefied it.
Oh, shouts out to Christopher Nolan.
We
God
love
bless
Nolan
us.
on this podcast. We really do.
God bless us all if he ever gets an Avengers movie.
I would love to see it. I mean, he made 2 great Batman films.
He would unleash the Hulk on Tokyo or something.
Who would
He would
play
do
the
something.
Hulk?
He would do something interesting.
Michael Caine
Yeah.
would be the Hulk.
It's got to be real.
The first film worked for a number of reasons. I think number one being the fish out of water stuff with Thor on Earth. That was great. Very funny, very charming. In this one, Jane Foster is sort of the fish out of water. And for me, that's just way less interesting because there's nothing interesting about her character. You're not invested in her character at all.
Who is Jane Foster besides a pretty face?
It felt like a very forced romance, and I feel like it was just part of that same kind of wooden performance that really just genuinely didn't interest me. And I feel like trying to really have that be the forefront of the story going along with all of this dark elf stuff going on, it just felt very out of place.
There was CGI involved too. This is not a rumor. This is confirmed. So Portman was so done with the film that she didn't bother showing up to the final reshoot. And for the post-credit scene where Thor and Jane are kissing, they actually used Hemsworth's real-life wife, Elsa Pataki, and they put her in a brown wig to shoot the kissing scene. And then they touched it up with some CGI.
Why didn't they just cast her? She's an actress. She's pretty. They actually apparently have chemistry. It just makes sense. Maybe he didn't want, ether put in her. I don't know.
They would have wanted Natalie Portman in this movie very badly, though, too. She was just coming off an Oscar win for Black Swan.
Okay.
So you always, anytime you're a studio, we can get an Academy Award winner, we can keep her.
Black Swan was pretty big. Comic book movies don't seem to be her thing.
No.
Sorry, wasn't Black Swan still before the first Thor?
It might have been, but the point is, like, still, you're fresh off that, right? You're like, it's not like she's, I don't know. It's not like, well, we got Glenn Close, who's never won an Oscar,
She was definitely still getting casting roles from that, hands down. Okay, so why Jane? Why her? Does anyone know?
Is she in the comics, Anton?
She is in the comics, and I feel like it was just the easiest low-hanging fruit that Marvel said people are going to be able to understand a romance between Jane Foster and Thor. Even though really in the comics it's not as big or like a constant in the series.
And as Dennis correctly pointed out on the first Thor episode, the real romance is between Thor and Selvig.
Yeah.
They had 100 times more chemistry.
His brother's been inside of him. They're basically related.
That's right.
But why Jane? Why are the elves and their ether and the darkness and Jane connected at all?
I mean, she literally stumbles into the plot via coincidence. There's no...
Is it because she's the best scientist?
They don't ever call her Dr. Foster either. I feel like that's an insult to her. Like, she's a doctor. She's a scientist.
Respect.
Or is she one of those, like, you go to the doctor's office and you just like, oh, I'm just a nurse practitioner. It's like, can I see a real doctor? No offense.
I just take the blood. I don't know. If there's a good solid reason and I'm missing it, that's on me.
I don't think there is.
Okay. Anton?
No, I mean, there's so many other stories that they could have written about. But that's the thing with Thor is that it's always leaning into more of like the mythology, this greater pantheon of gods, looking more into how does Thor fit into like kind of the more mythological fantasy side of Marvel. But they really didn't dive into that, or they tried to dive into that a bit more with this film, but trying to ground that with a romantic love interest. And when you try to ground it a bit too much, or traditionally what Hollywood would expect of a romance focused love story, of course it doesn't really land well.
I would probably been more interested if it was Kat Dennings that got the ether and when they had to save her and she was like being witty and jokey while like her head was spinning around or doing whatever exorcism stuff she would do, you know? Like she would play it up like, ether, you know what I mean? Like evil Kat Dennings would be, I think, more lively than the board of wood that we got that was Natalie Portman just there.
Yeah, and that would have propped up really well with her being in it was the heyday of Two Broke Girls.
See?
Yeah.
I don't know. Put her in. I think that was like probably a big why wasn't it better type of thing, is the bad thing happening to the person, but there was no chemistry between Thor and the audience, I think, and Natalie Portman, unfortunately.
And this actually touches on earlier, when we read the plot outright, it seems a little ridiculous. If it's executed well, it seems genuine and authentic. So however Jane was written, it's up to Natalie Portman to deliver those lines or deliver that role, and it just came off the same way as we were talking about, just not very well.
Now, Viceroy will discuss a new treaty.
There was a whole copy-paste aspect to this movie that I felt was being followed from the first movie. If you look at the opening scene.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It feels
Frost
like
giants, dark elves, whatever.
Bifrost.
Yeah, sure.
There's no relation.
No. I couldn't tell them apart. I had trouble remembering who was who. I'm like, so which planet was this?
Yeah, right. Oh, there's a blue square. Oh, it's a red ether.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's just, it felt like there was a lot that was very just kind of like, ooh, we'll just change a little bit here, squeak that a little bit, and
Anthony Hopkins is like, I'm too lazy to discuss this with you, but here's a book that explains everything.
Yeah. How many times? Okay, I think it's.
We'll get it. Save it, because we have a whole section on the plot. Next reason, the studio meddling.
What do we got?
Well, we covered the Patty Jenkins piece to this. There was a lot of reshoots that they did here. Mm-hmm. That can be a red flag. I think it is here. The director, Alan Taylor, he explained that this was all part of what he called the Marvel process. And, quote, we're doing full scenes that were not in the movie before. We're adding scenes, creating scenes, writing scenes for the first time. The one involving Loki was a fun, connective scene. We realized how well Loki was working in the movie, and we wanted to do more with him. So it was that kind of thing. It was like, oh, we could do this. We could jam this in here because he's such a wonderful guy to watch do his stuff, end quote. So what this tells me is that they didn't have a lot of faith in the central plot, so they decided to add more Loki. I'm not complaining necessarily. Loki's probably the best thing about this film, but it does say a lot about the plot when you're like, put more Loki in.
They locked him up, and he should be carrying these movies as he does when he's on the screen. I don't know how else to put it. He is the central villain, and they don't play on that very well in this movie. Even though they kind of do, they don't utilize it. He's, he's still doing his thing. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, and all of Loki's part had more character development than Jane had, like, the entire movie. And of course, it makes me feel for him, see how his character develops, see a bit of a redemption arc for the Loki character and trying to avenge, like, their mother. And then, of course, you still get the same Loki twist at the end. Like, it's very perfect, and it's a great way to, like, it is something that I really appreciate about the film, was having more Loki in it.
Definitely.
Can you answer this question? How many times has Loki died up to this point?
Like, fake died?
I mean, yeah.
How did he fake his death at the end of this?
This time?
Because it wasn't an illusion when he got stabbed through the chest, right?
The curse got him.
He got better.
He seemed, I guess he survived that. Sure.
Yeah. He said, I'm bleeding.
And then Odin disappeared.
That was it.
But then you see, right, they don't explain, I mean, I guess he snuck in off screen and...
He couldn't get out of jail, but he could just fake his death like it's no problem.
I was under the impression they designed that cell specifically for him so that he couldn't get out.
Right, so he couldn't use his powers to get out.
Right.
But they can't figure out how he keeps faking his own death and sneaking around.
No.
acting like Odin.
Anton, does he actually die at the beginning of Infinity War
He does.
when Thanos chokes
when
him
Thanos
out?
actually chokes him out. That was
it.
Oh, he
confirmed.
actually did die because I wasn't even sure then.
They even confirmed it in like the Loki TV series. Like, oh yeah, like a version of you died in this universe.
A version of him.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't with this stuff.
Infinite universes, man.
That's why I just stopped after Endgame. Like, yeah, I'm good here.
They just pull a Uno reverse card on everything.
I don't need. I'm good.
I mean, that's very elementary comic book stuff. Like infinite universes, multiverses. They didn't have to tap into that at this point in the MCU because we're still just telling stories at this point.
Speaking of storytelling, Joss Whedon rewrote several scenes in this film, and Taylor explained it as, quote, Joss came in to save our lives a couple of times. We had a major scene that was not working on the page at all in London, and he basically got airlifted in like a SWAT team or something. He came down, rewrote the scene, and before he got back on his plane, I sort of grabbed him and said, and this scene, and he rewrote two other scenes that I thought had problems, end quote. I love how Alan Taylor's just admitting, like, this movie kind of sucked, and we had to, like, bring other people in to save it.
I mean, what is the plot outside of the elves? I'm not sure.
It's a giant, there's this doomsday thing happening. We have to stop it. That's it. That's all it is.
Yeah, a lot going on. They're bouncing between the dark world and, our world. There's a lot of, like, unexplained teleportation, transportation, where apparently the Bifrost can do this thing, and it's like a big thing that's really hard to do, and they're doing this stuff seemingly easily. I don't know. It's kind of mixing and matching what you find to be easy and is what is difficult in this world, in this universe.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we have to consider is like, what is the theme of the film and how does it kind of fit into the story? And if they're trying to kind of continue with the theme of like revolving around this particular infinity stone that the film's focused on, right? The ether is the reality stone. And of course, what do they cover a lot in the story of the film is about like chaos, and there's a lot of chaos occurring. So is it naturally saying that like life can be very chaotic? And so in that sense, that kind of fits. But at the end of the day, you could also just say the film was also just, the writing was very chaotic.
According to Kevin Feige, he said the film was intended to be the conclusion of the Loki trilogy, which examined the relationship of Thor and Loki throughout Thor, the Avengers, and this film. I guess, yeah. I mean,
sure.
They changed their mind, like,
did.
as they were walking out the door with the film, and
they're like, you know what? Let's throw him back in Ragnarok.
Yeah.
We have documented evidence. Like, they had no idea what they wanted this film to be. Even throughout filming, they were like, let's put more Loki in. Let's put more humor in.
Yeah. I don't think they got to utilize him enough because they had him basically in prison, most of the movie. So,
right.
It's just one of those things where I guess, you take it with a grain of salt, where it's the Marvel Universe. It's a comic book. He's the magic guy, and he's back.
He was originally intended to die in the film, but after test audiences didn't believe he was actually dead, they rewrote the ending. Now, if you include Joss Whedon, I was doing the tally here, at least 6 different writers worked on the screenplay officially, and there were rumored to be more that went uncredited.
What's
a lot of cooks in the kitchen?
Yeah. Jeez. What's a typical movie got? 2, 3?
2, 3. I mean, it depends. Like this type of big studio movie, there's usually a lot of fingers in the pie.
Yeah.
A smaller budget film will usually like have a script. Maybe they hire someone to rewrite it. They make a couple of edits. But a major rewrite usually indicates they want to take things in a different direction, which I would imagine with these Marvel films, it happens quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's like several different aspects that are also kind of making this direction very malleable. It's what are we going to execute on in this film? How are we going to have that influence like this greater architect of the Infinity Saga, which we can assume at this point they were still fleshing out, still planning for, but still fleshing out.
I mean, think about it like this. The studio, like the creative committee, they had an entire rewrite made for this film and Iron Man 3 solely on the basis of we need to sell more toys.
That's one way
I get it, but
to justify it.
Yeah, Now, Marcus and McFeely, who got credited, right? They later admitted that there was so much ambiguity over the shooting script that they weren't even sure that they would get official credit in the end. Now, they did. There were other story ideas that went nowhere. I read that there was another abandoned idea that had the ether turning Jane into a straight up villain who was going to destroy one of the worlds. You could see the blueprint for that, right? Because at one point, don't her eyes turn black or red or something, and you're like, "Whoa, where's this going? Nowhere."
Yeah, right. I mean, you would think it would have been a little more like maybe X-Men Phoenix ish.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
they don't do it.
but
They
they don't.
don't. They don't. That's where.
Malekith,
Yeah.
he's the other big part of this. He was supposed to have more screen time before Loki became a fan favorite. The version of the script used for the junior novelization, Anton, you'll like this,
Yeah.
that did not include Frigga's death. And it also stopped after the memorial for those who died in the attack on Asgard.
Hmm.
So that must have been written and published like well before they got this going.
Yeah, they really wanted to make sure to get to the kids early at the Scholastic book fairs. So
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah.
There were two endings given for Thor and Jane. The first one had them realizing that their worlds meant they couldn't be together. It also featured Odin visiting Thor on Earth, and Thor is ready to take the throne. Loki's death was, again, originally supposed to be permanent, but that was scrapped. They figured it would be easier to have Thor stay on Earth because Age of Ultron was coming. So Loki ended up faking his death and secretly taking the throne for himself, which they
Yeah.
did to please the test audiences, I suppose. Again,
Mhm.
a lot of that you see off screen. You don't actually see him take the throne and take Odin's
Yeah,
place.
no.
But
We really don't know what happened there. Did he put like a bag over his head?
Anthony Hopkins actually died of boredom.
He put him in the back room.
Yeah. My favorite bored Anthony Hopkins role is when they, when they have Jane on like it's not an operating table. It's like they're basically in like the doctor's office on Asgard, and they have her in like the X-ray thing, and
Yeah, the
like
bubble. She's
yeah,
just
Hopkins just like wanders in. He's just like, "Oh, it's the ether." Just no emotion. He's like, "Oh, I know what that is."
the way he talks about humans, it really does make you wonder. Like, even if Thor does have a relationship with her, it won't. He'll be looking the way he does, and she would be like an old woman in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, who
And
cares?
then, yeah, he does thousands of years of life after that. So it's like, I don't know if you like, as far as Odin goes, he's kind of right where it's like, human life is fleeting. Like, yeah, go be with her. Don't be with her. Who cares? So it kind of makes you feel, I don't know, a little less. It made me feel a little less vested because he's like, sure, go be with her for her whole life for a few years, whatever. It's such a small amount of time for an Asgardian that I don't know,
Yeah, and
takes me away from it.
and I feel like that's just poor writing to not write a compelling romance that you want them to be together, right?
Yeah, it made me feel like it was less important in
It
a
was more
way.
like, sure, whatever, just keep the plot moving.
Yeah, like
Do whatever you want.
Yeah, right. The humans or whatever. It's like, yeah, he does care about humans, but it is kind of funny because it's like, even if he does, it's only a small fraction of their lives. So, I don't know.
Alan Taylor, he was dissatisfied with the finished film, and he called it a quote particularly wrenching experience. You don't usually hear directors slamming Marvel like this. He really must have had a bad time. I was surprised to hear how surprised he was, though. Going back over the production history, right? He wasn't their first choice. He was like, at best, their fourth choice. It's like, this was never his film. Why would he ever
Yeah,
think that he would get creative control? He actually later expressed an interest in releasing his own version of the film, akin to
That's
the
so funny.
Snyder cut of the Justice League. It's like,
yeah.
there's
That has
no
to be a
way
joke.
Marvel's going to let you do that, man.
That has to
No.
be a joke. It's just
That's what he said.
yeah, but like very much just a stand-in director, right? Literally, like just keep things moving. We have what our priorities are.
I think I have a little bit of a zag on this.
Mhm.
It's one of the things I actually like about Marvel. They don't do director's cuts. They don't do alternate versions. They're like, these are the movies that we release. Take it or leave it. I'll give you the polar opposite of that, Anton. Like, remember before Napoleon came out, you had Ridley Scott doing interviews and stating like, yeah, I don't even like the theatrical version of my film. I have a 4-hour director's cut that I'm going to release later. It's way better. It's like, so you don't want us to even see your movie?
I mean, I feel like
Why? Yeah, why?
It's like, okay, so I shouldn't see the movie in the theaters that you directed? Is that what you're telling me? Like,
It's not something that we haven't seen before, right? Like, what is it? Once Upon a Time in America, there's like a 4-hour version.
yeah. Sometimes
And
it works out, right? Like Kingdom of
yeah,
Heaven. That's a great Ridley Scott example where the theatrical version, it's okay. The
or
director's
there's
cut, it's one of my favorite movies.
6 different versions of Blade Runner.
Right. When we actually cover Blade Runner, I guess we should do the theatrical version, right?
The theatrical Ridley Scott
Yeah.
director's Neo cut.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to like figure out which one you guys are doing to watch before I listen.
You know what?
When you see the unicorn in the beginning,
When I think about it, I don't even know which version of Blade Runner I've seen. I have no idea.
and you've just revealed you're a replicant.
Bam.
Maybe. It's like
I don't remember which one I saw. No, we were all supposed to know.
It was Barzini all along. Number 3 reason why this film wasn't better. I have weak sauce villain and the plot.
Yeah. Oh man, just generic.
It's generic, but I texted you about this, Anton, because I needed your input. I also texted Garrett, our Marvel consigliere, about this.
Garrett, friend of the show,
Yeah.
our recently married Garrett.
That's
Congrats.
right. Congratulations to Garrett.
Shouts out.
Malekith is about as lightweight and uninteresting and weak as a villain gets, but his plan is heavy.
Yeah.
This is true.
Possibly
but-
the heaviest in the entire MCU, if you think about it.
Do you
Right?
ever, at any point in this movie, think that that guy is going to succeed in anything?
Oh, no.
No. But like to your point, Pat, it's a pretty big universe changing plan that he has.
Correct me if I'm wrong. He was going to kill everyone in the universe.
Blackout.
Well,
Everything.
because he wants the universe back to how it was in the beginning, like dark for him and his race.
I don't think he has a lot of
Dark elves.
foresight.
But I mean, like, they never really go into either why is it better for the dark elves that everything's dark? Are they weaker in the light, if there's any light?
Are they like orcs in Lord of the Rings? Like sunlight's bad for them?
Will they achieve like a newer society in this dark universe? They don't really go into it. You just know that he wants to do it.
He says he wants to return to glory for his people, but like, what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Actually, so it says here, Malachi doesn't like sunglasses. Yeah.
He has a lot of... He was shorting the stock on Sunglasses Hut.
He's he's shorting yeah, exactly. Sunscreen and UV ray protection wear. I mean, so the elves thrive in the darkness, but they also exist, I guess, just fine in the light, which is now.
They were in suspended animation for 5,000 years, right? Because they said like, oh, they're extinct. They don't
no
exist.
such thing as a dark elf
Anthony
anymore.
Hopper, what's his name? Odin. Yeah, Odin. He's like, yeah, we wiped them all out. They're all gone. It's like, well,
Your grandfather bore.
Again, right? I would say weak sauce because it's all tied together. It's a house with like the best materials, Brazilian woods and just nice hard construction, hardwoods throughout, but it's like put together the wrong way. So it's like all cockeyed and like nothing's level and just, you could, yeah.
He's a fast food villain of the week. Like, he's not as bad as Emil Blonsky, in my opinion, Anton.
No, not as bad, but at the same time, like, I didn't love the Abomination character from the comics just because there wasn't really a lot of nuance and motivation. Malekith in the comics, way cooler. Such a cool
I can
villain.
see it. Yeah.
Because it's very clear motivation for who he is. Someone that has a really tragic past, is very cunning, very like theatrical, actually has a lot more personality to him in every scene that he's in. And when you see him show up and he has his crew, the Dark Elves, like, oh, something's about to go down. And that's who he is in the comics. He really is a very, scary force. But
based on his plan and what he wanted to do, wouldn't this make him a bigger deal than Thanos?
In a different movie. No one's going to believe it in a Stepping Stone film.
No, not in this movie. But I mean, like, based on his plan, I was just rewatching it the other day. I'm like, wow, he would have probably killed more people than Thanos if he had succeeded.
Yes. And to your point, both of you, it's a Stepping Stone movie. So he needs, and you're so right, because again, the problem is that he's a one movie villain and they squeeze them in And this plot, being an Infinity Stone plot, could have stretched into an Avengers movie with Malachi bumping heads with Thanos or something along those lines. And they squeezed it into this, like you said, stepping stone movie that just doesn't really do it for the hardcore fans, I would say.
You know it too. Like the very first second when he wakes up from the suspended animation thing, you're like, ugh, just ugh.
And look, that's just kind of one of the key differences between like a comic book and like the film. In a comic book, the consequences of an action in like one series run, you have like 6 issues that cover like how are the heroes going to take down this villain. Eventually that can be revisited again. But movies don't have that. They don't have that chance. They only have about like one movie to kind of deliver the impact that can influence a film later. Like when they tell like Age of Ultron or when they eventually have the Infinity War. There's probably no chance they're going to revisit this one particular villain. So it's really just let's tell the story, and unfortunately it comes off very one-dimensional.
Yeah.
That guy who plays him, Eccleston,
Mhm.
he's a good actor too. It's kind of a shame he didn't get more screen time because I've seen him in other things and I like him, but he's hidden behind a lot of makeup here. Very generic. He just wakes up when he gets woken up in his spaceship. He's just like, I'm bad. I need to kill things. That's it. That's all he does.
Yeah.
Very forgettable.
The most.
Like when I started rewatching this the other day, I could not even remember who the villain was. I was like, Malekith? Like who is this?
And you're like, wait, is that King Piccolo from Dragon Ball?
I remember the Ice Giants way more. And again, because there were so many what I felt was copy paste
Yeah.
elements, it was easy to in my mind swap them out with the battle scenes with the, who's the bad guy with the Ice Giants.
That gets us into the plot, which is pretty messy. And it
Mm-hmm.
100% starts with the prologue, like you said, Dennis, with the copy and paste stuff. We get the same lethargic Anthony Hopkins. Long ago, we fought these things called the Dark Elves. Remember
Okay.
from the first movie where I said the same thing about the Frost Giants? This is the same thing, except that they're called Dark Elves because this is the second movie. Got it? It's the same narration. It's the same thing.
Yeah, they chase a ruby red stone, and the Ice Giants like the blue stone. So,
But this one's a little bit of a liquid.
Big difference. Big difference. Huge.
I wrote this down. Malekith is waiting for something called the convergence, when all the planets align, which only happens every 5,000 years. Basically the plot of Lara Croft Tomb Raider.
Yeah, this is your very standard fantasy evil force like plot. Wait until literally the stars align to hatch your evil scheme.
You kind of pity Malekith in a way. It's like he waited this is what he waited 5,000 years. Think of all the stuff he could have done.
And
Yeah.
he
5,000 years.
Fumbled the bag?
It really did. Okay, Anton, this is where my questions for you are going to start, where I really need some comic book knowledge here.
All right, let's go.
How does Jane immediately get teleported to the place where the ether is being kept hidden?
She has a secret superpower of being very lucky.
I was going to say, so that's the plot of the movie, right? And it basically gets kicked. No, not basically. It only gets kicked off because of some silly coincidence.
What do they call it? Failing forward?
Imagine if one of those kids in the abandoned warehouse had just stumbled into it. It would have been a whole different movie.
That's what I was thinking.
Or like Dennis said, Kat Dennings.
Or Kat Dennings' intern.
Or the intern.
And again, even then, that would be more interesting because now you have Kat Dennings vested in this movie, maybe. Like after she makes, he saves her, or she saves him, and then, now all of a sudden.
Cracking jokes.
Yeah, but here we are.
So the ether, that's our MacGuffin.
Mm-hmm. It's boring.
It's
very
the
boring.
reality stone. We don't know that at the time. That's later revealed. Here's my question for you, Anton. It doesn't do any of the reality stone stuff in this film. In this film, it just makes someone into like a gigantic doomsday device.
Well, it's very similar to how when we think of the first Captain America movie where they use the Tesseract and they just use it to power stuff.
Make lasers.
Yeah, it's just, okay, we really shouldn't be using it for that. But then using it as like a self-sustaining energy source. And I feel like the ethers used very similarly here. It's an all-powerful thing, and that ambiguity allows it to be used, right, like a MacGuffin, to just suit the purpose of the story. But it's just so boring. Why
I'll
use
be
it
honest
like
with
that?
you. Even when you see Thanos using it in Infinity War, I still am not really clear on what it does. But
You
I
can warp
mean,
reality
but how? Like it?
it
within the
does what
constructs of your
I
mind.
imagine. It does what Loki does.
Except
Okay.
except
Oh
more
yeah. Okay. All
except
right.
with more permanence.
Bigger.
Right. But then
Think
he
bigger.
undoes it too.
Yeah,
You could do
it's
whatever.
Oh, whatever you want. That's a
yeah,
good writing device, actually. Whatever you want.
yeah. It's and I feel like that's again,
The
it's up
world
to
is
the
your
it's like in the comments, it's up to the writer, like what is
Right.
the
Okay.
actual like power leveling of any of the stones.
D-
But why use it in such a boring way here?
does it have a mind of its own?
They do say that the stones have some sort of sentience, or at least like
Because in
they
this one, it's really acting like the symbiote from Spider-Man 3 when it like latches on to Jane.
I
It
was
looked
just
like the
thinking
Venom
that.
symbiote.
So the person wielding the stone has certain effects, powers, abilities to wield said stone.
Obviously, Jane can't control it though.
She can't handle that
no,
shit.
Yeah.
no,
No.
she can't
Excuse
handle
my
it.
French.
She can't handle that shit.
She just goes full, like I said, basically exorcism. Like needs the demon expelled from her. Otherwise, she'll die.
I mean, look, let's really think about how any of the Infinity Stones are used in any of the MCU films. It barely touches on them being used. It's not really until Infinity War that they're even used like their actual names. And even then, the Mind Stone, the Reality Stone, the Soul Stone, like how are half of them even used? You don't really get it.
No, you're right. It's fast and loose.
Yeah. No, good point. It's I think that doesn't come in probably till the Doctor Strange era where you start really getting an understanding.
And then that one's so on the nose. And because it's probably the easiest one to get a grasp of. Oh, it's the Time Stone.
Yeah.
And they say time like 300 times in that movie.
That made the most sense to me because it was very clearly demonstrated in Doctor Strange like what the Time Stone could do.
Yeah.
You know,
Versus like the Soul Stone. What does that do?
not a clue.
You
It
end up
felt
in a
like
place with a lot of water.
they drew a line and made a box and was like, this is where we're operating within, so you can understand the parameters at least a little bit in this chaotic universe.
And then, what was the one where they made the stone out of Paul Bettany?
The Mind Stone.
Sure, yeah, that one.
The yellow one, right?
I think so. Yes,
Yeah.
it was yellow.
And,
yes,
and exactly. So then, even then, I'm like, so what does this stone do? It creates it creates vision. Is that the stone's only purpose?
I'm a real boy.
Now, of course, there's the Mind Stone in the comics, but
Is it Vision? Is it I don't know. What's his name? Javits?
Jarvis.
Jarvis, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, he like merged with what's his name?
Vision. I don't know. Jarvis
Ultron,
and
right?
Ultron
with the
Vision,
Ultron,
Jarvis. It's a
I
fusion.
have not seen. Man, I'm. That's the one Marvel movie I'm not looking forward to rewatching. I didn't like that movie at all.
Fun reveal. I actually didn't think it was that bad.
Age of Ultron?
Anton, do I need to remind you? It's like 150 minutes.
There are so many moments that I really enjoy out of that film that I don't completely hate it. I'm
I
not
don't
trying to say
hate
I
it,
love
but
it.
like it's just one of those movies. You're like, why is this 2.5 hours?
Is
Like
that
at
the
least this
one-
one, which we'll get to the runtime of this. Brisk.
Right.
What's that one?
Ultron or this one?
No, Ultron. The one like how brisk.
Oh, it's not brisk at all. It's 2.5
It's
hours.
very long.
Wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
that's
is
the one with-
about an hour and a half, which is tolerable.
yeah.
Back to the plot.
What do we got?
I have in my notes. It's pretty much Thor's fault. His mother gets killed because he brings Jane to Asgard.
Yep.
This also goes unanswered. Thor, the Warriors 3, and Heimdall commit, in their own words, treason of the highest order. This is serious enough that most of Asgard's forces are deployed to stop them, including shooting lasers at them. It's never brought up again, and we never see the consequences of this.
Did you guys see that they recast one of the Warriors 3?
No.
Yeah, it
No.
was I'm
Which
sure
guy?
we weren't paying too attention. The one that looks like the Green Arrow,
With the mustache?
Definitely
Robin
didn't
Hood?
notice that.
the one that looks like Robin Hood.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, so he was just fun little crossover. He ends up getting played by Zachary Levi in this film, and it's in Ragnarok.
Great recasting, because he looked just like the guy from the first one.
And of course, he ends up then playing Shazam in the DC's Shazam film. And he also plays Kurt Warner. So,
Huh. Dennis and I have no response.
In Kurt Warner? Like
in
real life?
Is there a Kurt Warner movie?
In real life?
In the Underdog film. Yeah.
Okay.
Should we
I was
cover
gonna
it?
say.
We can. It actually is so generic, like generic sports film. Because like the Kurt Warner story, right? Like he
Yeah.
infamously or famously bagging groceries and then ends up winning a Super Bowl.
Very Christian.
Think of the cheesiest Hollywood underdog sports film, and beat by beat, it's that film.
Okay.
Should that be the movie we make Eric watch?
I think we just found it.
Okay. Eric
Sounds
doesn't like
like
sports
the one.
movies, so he was like, give me a sports movie. I was like,
Oh,
okay.
this is like sounds like Remember the Titans, but like level of drama, but without all the story.
There's literally a part in it where he's one of the offensive coach is giving like Kurt Warner like really digging into him, and you think you hate him, and then 20 minutes later he's like, I was only hard on you because I knew you had it in you to be a champion.
It's
And
like
you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming.
it could have been a guy that just lived in the suburbs that no one knows, but he ended up Kurt Warner because this one guy like really believed in him.
Was he played by Louis Gossett Jr.?
No.
Okay. Back to the plot of Thor: The Dark World. So his
Right.
plan is to blast the ether with his hammer, but that doesn't work.
His hammer.
Why doesn't he just
work a
kill
lot.
Malekith?
Because
Could just kill him, then that takes care of that.
His hammer gets smacked away from him like it's a toy.
I'm
Like-
not even clear on how they kill Malekith at the end of this film.
They
he
Do
ends
the-
up just blowing himself up, right?
go
Did
beep
he?
boop beep boop beep on their science thing.
I was
Yeah.
zoning out real bad by that point, though. I'll be honest.
Well, because he gets hit with the blast. He like gets thrown into the ship, and then
How many times do you think
Ship
I
go
watched
boom.
that like last 30 minutes at this point?
It's
in my
either
life?
one or like a bunch.
A bunch. Like
Okay.
four.
You were trying to figure stuff
Five.
out.
and you're like,
Yeah,
wait,
and
how
then-
did this work?
I zone out every time. It's insane. They're
It's crazy.
They're doing the port again. It gets really dark. They're doing the portals. The hammer's flying around. I don't know which world they're in and going for, and does all of a sudden the things work better than they did before? Because the hammer didn't work at all with the cursed, and then it does. I don't know.
I think
No.
part of it is we also just know how inconsequential this movie is to just the MCU in general, and you just kind of feel like, let's just finish this film already.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I did like actually one thing I will say the fake destruction of said ether when you think they got him, just when you think they
when he
got him,
shatters it?
just when you think I'm out, they pull you right back in and they get the ether. You can't
Yeah.
destroy it. It's an infinity.
No,
And
you can't get rid of it.
yeah. No, it's just you and I truly actually thought that was it. That was in the rewatch. I was like, oh yeah, this is how it ends.
So
And I'm
Anton,
like, oh,
they're
no.
like Horcruxes from Harry Potter, right? Like it takes like very, very powerful magic to destroy one of them.
Or like you have to be Scarlet Witch because she destroyed one. Right?
Did she?
In Infinity War, she like killed Vision and destroyed the Infinity
Oh, right,
Stone.
right.
But-
And then he time stones it. He does like the microwave
Yeah.
rewind.
And we're gonna fix this.
Right. That was the oh shit part of that movie. When he starts dialing it back, you're like, oh shit, he's gonna do that.
He's doing the
Thanos!
thing.
Oh, we can't let him have any of the stones. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I thought we were good by just fixing, keeping him from getting this one, but no.
No.
No, he can't have any.
Loki remains undefeated. Tom Hiddleston, as usual, he steals every scene he's in.
Mhm.
He's phenomenal. He should have been given his own movie and not that streaming series that I haven't watched.
I thought that in this film, Hemsworth actually had a bit more. I think like the delivery was starting to be a bit more light, not quite as comedic as we finally got in Thor Ragnarok, which I think was him really hitting his stride as Thor. But I think playing that together with Loki in this film, I really like their chemistry together.
Oh, they're a perfect duo.
right? Because it's just awesome. And
Their
then
chemistry is unmatched.
I think perfected in Thor Ragnarok though.
Yeah.
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 It's close to Step Brothers with Will Ferrell. It's
Yes.
like that level of chemistry.
My final question about the plot, Anton. So Loki's secret passage out of Asgard, it just happens to go directly to the dark world? Has Loki been there before? It doesn't seem like he has, because we know in the first film he was secretly conspiring with the frost giants, but how would he know how to get to the dark world? It doesn't make sense at all.
It doesn't make sense. I don't think that's answered at all in
No.
the comics. I don't think I have a very clear answer here. But fun fact, and probably why, like, it would have made more sense, but this is what we got. Malekith is more like Loki in the comics than what we actually saw portrayed in the film. And so if you ever wondered, like, oh, how should he be? Like, actually think of Loki in the films. That would have been a more proper performance.
But of course they couldn't have two Lokis.
But you couldn't have two Lokis.
No.
Loki's just not interested in the Infinity Stones anymore. Just
Do they know that it's one of the Infinity Stones?
whatever it is, he's just not interested in
Yeah.
whatever the most powerful thing is for himself.
Actually, is that answered in the film? Do they know it's one of the Infinity Stones? Because they knew that the Tesseract was, right?
Yeah. Did when they gave when Lady Sif gives the stone to the collector, did they say like, here, it's an Infinity Stone? Or they
I think
just know
they
this
do.
is for, or they're like, oh, is this for safekeeping? I forget. Yeah.
He knows that it's one of the Infinity Stones because
Yeah,
he says it's one of what? How many to go?
I think he says one down, 5 to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to rewatch all these again. It's there's so many. There's like 30 movies at this point. You can't keep track of this stuff.
How many times up to this point in this movie has Loki died? I think it's 3.
3?
Well, okay, so let's think about this.
Well, in the first one, he just floats away after the Bifrost gets destroyed.
So you assume he's dead, but
No,
it's
you
not
know
like
he's not
a
dead.
confirmed
You know
dead.
he's not dead.
Right.
And this one might be the first one, right?
Avengers, he just gets arrested.
Yeah,
Right.
he doesn't get killed in Avengers.
No, because we see the immediate aftermath of that at the beginning of this film when he's in cuffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think.
That's how it starts.
So this is
Yeah.
his second time.
Okay.
Okay. And then he's confirmed alive at the end. So
Right.
Right.
too solid.
Yeah. Anton's on a bit of a time crunch here. Let's move into the final reason. The production. This was, in my opinion, the beginning of the assembly line, cookie cutter, Marvel template look. And I'm talking about the visuals. This is a dull looking movie. There's a lot of gray. Everything looks flat. It's some of the most uninspiring digital cinematography in the MCU. If it wasn't for the massive CGI budget, you'd think this would be filmed for television. And I found it disappointing because we all agreed the first Thor film really pops visually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they destroy Asgard, and that's basically where all the money went, and it wasn't as visually appealing to watch it be destroyed.
All of the scenes on Earth, I think it was pretty distinct. None of the films or none of the scenes filmed were in the US. It was all in Europe, basically.
London.
It was in London. It was all in London.
I get the grayness there.
So
gray
it's just
sky, gray buildings, it rains a lot. I get it, but
so it just kind of fit the theme.
It's the dark world, everything's dark. Like I said, especially in the last 20, 30 minutes, very dark, very what's happening on the screen. You have to kind of squint to see things. It seems like, I don't know.
That was the biggest disappointment of the film for me. The Dark Elves' homeworld, one of the most boring planets imaginable. Gloomy, very obviously computer-generated lighting. I know they filmed the outdoor stuff for that in Iceland, but it was very clear that none of the actors were on location. They were very obviously on a set, and the lighting was just so dull.
If we're making like a dark fantasy atmosphere, it could have been way cooler. I would have taken like a Spencer's Gifts. But
just a dirt planet.
Especially when we consider all the names attached, like about Game of Thrones inspiration. There was such rich source material for the actual like Dark Elves home from the comics, but no, just you don't get that.
I thought the Dark Elves themselves looked cool, like the masks they were wearing. That looked pretty cool.
That very menacing.
They look menacing. They all just look very gray and very...
They're just stormtroopers.
Very stormtrooper, very... Yeah. Yeah. So I'm with you.
Curse was a badass. You're waiting for him to go hard, and he does. That paid off. They pulled that off well, I thought, because they built him up as this guy. You're like, he's probably going to kick some ass, and he does. They delivered on that.
Right. Then.
And I thought the black hole grenades were pretty cool.
Well, it just seemed like the Curse would have been the better like end villain versus Malachi at that point because I always go back to like the way you smack the hammer out of Thor's hand and act like it was nothing, right? Like, okay, that seems to be the guy that would be the end of the movie villain to destroy if they're gonna do this in one film like they did. But they try and squeeze too much, I think, into one movie, and it makes it seem like, again, who's the villain? Is it the Ether? Is it the Malachi? Is it the Curse combination? Loki? There's a lot going on, and we know about Thanos at this point, so
that's right.
He's floating around. Who's the bad guy? Huh? Who's the real bad guy? I want to know.
It's not these guys.
No. Yeah, no. Is it Jane Foster?
Could have been in part of the script. We haven't really talked about Hemsworth much. We mentioned him earlier briefly. I think apart from Hiddleston and apart from their chemistry, he is the reason why this movie doesn't completely fail. Not just the beefcake from the first one. They wrote his character well. I thought you see how much he's learned from the first film and the Avengers. He seems a lot smarter, a lot wiser. You think that Loki's going to trick him and he doesn't fall for it. They actually give him an arc. That's what I like about Thor throughout these films is you can see his character in particular evolving along with Tony, along with Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers, I don't know if Steve Rogers gets Steve Rogers definitely evolves after what happens to him in Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
But he's probably the most consistent in character.
Yeah, for sure. And I would think Tony and Thor probably have the most satisfying character arcs.
Like throughout the whole, like throughout all of the MCU.
Think,
from where they start, the person that they are, opening scene of the first movie, to where you end up a couple movies later, the person that they are, who, it's a completely different person, much evolved.
Yeah. I mean, I always felt like you had the punch first Captain America that was very patriotic to a Captain America that sees the Greys in Civil War to let me pretend to be in Hydra to avoid a fight in the Endgame film, and then also eventually go back in time to be with Peggy Carter. So I think he had a very satisfying story.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, actually, yeah. He had the biggest difference, but he was still he was always a good guy, right. I would say.
At his core.
Always a good guy, yeah.
Christopher Orr of The Atlantic writes, quote, when Hemsworth burst upon the scene in the first Thor, it wasn't clear whether or not he was the real deal, but following Cabin in the Woods, The Avengers, and especially Rush, his big screen charisma is no longer in doubt. There's good reason that he seems to have usurped the film career of his fellow Aussie action star Sam Worthington, or as I like to think of him, the modern-day George Lazenby, end quote. It's a good one.
Interesting.
I don't know enough to comment.
I mean, Sam Worthington just couldn't act.
Clash of the Titans.
Avatar.
I know Clash. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the most boring lead actors we've ever had. I mean, there's nothing going on upstairs.
Yeah. He's probably made more money than most actors that we do know. But
he may have made like more money than Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, right.
Just from Avatar too.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
God bless him. But yeah I wouldn't pick him out in a crowd.
No.
Nor know his name. He could walk up to me and be like, I was an Avatar, right? I'd be like,
really?
Were you like on the TV, like on the screen? Like, no, a writer?
Hemsworth is a interesting actor to follow because, Anton, we're going to be covering a lot of his films, and it's interesting what he's been in that worked and what didn't. Like, Rush did not make a lot of money, but everyone I know that sees it loves it.
Do we got to look at the Rotten Tomatoes and see, because
it's probably good.
It's got to be better than this.
Oh, for sure. And then something like, have you seen Black Hat?
Mm-hmm.
No.
He plays a computer hacker, and let's just say he's not a convincing computer hacker.
Wait, Chris Hemsworth?
Oh, yeah.
He has glasses.
Oh, man.
And, he's like one of the most like jacked actors ever. And like, he just, sorry, man, like this isn't your lane. He's also doing a weird Pittsburgh accent.
He did There was the film with him and Miles Teller on the science fiction film on the prison island.
Spiderhead?
Was that it? I don't
Maybe.
remember.
That sounds bad.
It was all right.
If it's called Spiderhead,
Yeah,
that sounds bad.
it's not good, actually. I take it back. I mean, but like when it comes to action,
Yeah.
he's great. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the Extraction films. They're really
Yeah.
fun action movies.
His nonstop action.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's best, I think, as Thor.
Oh, for sure. It'll always be his most iconic performance, and for good reason. He's amazing as it. You can't recast that.
He's not a convincing genius.
No.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for that one performance that'll be kind of a dramatic breakthrough for him to kind of get out of Thor's shadow. But I think at this point it's fair to say like Thor is going to be his career-defining role.
Yeah, very much agree.
We're just rattling through the notes here. The relationship between Frigga and her children, I thought was quite touching. When she gets killed, it's pretty emotional. Her funeral is, I think, really well done. It's one of the best things in the film.
And it's probably why, like, I remember this film a lot more is because we get a very convincing emotional turn for Loki, and part of that character arc is so convincing because of his or her relationship with her kids, and that just made it that much more, again, believable and compelling. That's a story I wanted to follow.
And Renee Russo's great. She's a great actress.
Yeah.
She's trying harder than Anthony Hopkins. He just, you can practically see him rolling his one eye. Just showing up for the paycheck.
I mean, I think he had Tom Hiddleston doing half the job for him, but
yeah. Do we want to take guesses of how Loki actually was able to, I don't know, accidentally lock Odin in the bathroom? Maybe
took his car keys.
Took his car keys.
Yeah, I don't know. He let his horse loose or something. I'm not sure. What is Odin ride?
Clear.
What?
Is it ever explained how he did it in any of the future films?
No,
I don't think it is.
They never explain it.
Pure fan service.
What does Odin ride? A chariot?
I think so.
The lightning.
Oh, he has that badass staff, the laser staff.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
He just shows up.
Yeah, and he just vaporizes a bunch of people.
Handel.
I have naked crazy Stellan Skarsgård is hilarious.
Yeah, you would have hoped that he would have gotten better mental health coverage compared to the rest of the staff at Shield.
They let him go.
Yeah.
You would have thought Shield would be kind of aware of his whereabouts, being how involved he was with the alien invasion, and
you'd think.
Seeing him on the news though was pretty funny.
Oh yeah, it was a great joke.
Yes.
The other great gag is the brilliant Chris Evans cameo. That gets me every time. I always forget about it.
Okay, wait,
when Loki's pretending to be him when they're walking out.
Yes. Oh, thank you. When he was switching characters back and forth.
Hilarious.
That was good. Yes. Everything he was saying in that little moment was just Chris Evans making fun of his own character because they had to get him to do it.
Yeah. It's brilliant. It really is. The pacing of this film, I thought was inconsistent. I thought the first two acts moved okay, minus the Earth stuff. And then everything on Asgard, fine. But the third act, I found the most boring, and it really shouldn't have because it has the most action in it. I was completely bored in the final 30, 40 minutes of this film.
I do have to just, again, admit it is my own personal bias that I know how inconsequential this movie is. And I feel like that made it that much more boring.
Again, the main character, I will forget the name tonight. Tomorrow will not be part of my conversation. There's characters, there's bad guys that I will talk about, in passing and, with friends about movies. Malachi won't be one.
But you could make the case, Anton, that they could have just executed it better. Yes, it's inconsequential. They could have made it more visually interesting. It's gray. It's dull. Think about Ragnarok, how colorful that movie is. Everything in Ragnarok is pretty inconsequential.
Right. But I think it's fair to say that there's partly not only my own disappointment with the film and its lack of execution,
right,
and then the fact that it doesn't continue to move the story forward for the most part. I feel like that's where it lands. But that's a really good point, Pat.
The film definitely peaks when Loki kills Curse. Rewatching it the other day, I thought that's where the movie ended, and I checked the runtime. I was like, wait, there's 30 minutes left, and then every time I forget about the whole ending in London with the portals and everything. They were trying to be creative with the portals and whatnot, but Dennis, to your point earlier, it was confusing. Like, how many worlds are going on here? Where is the hammer going? It's all kind of random. It's pedestrian. That's the
The
word.
worlds are aligning. They also have their science stuff going on at the same time, and it's confusing to me to just kind of absorb what's going on with what, who's controlling what, and I think they purposefully got a lot going on, but yeah,
There's fighter jets and libraries and
yes,
One could
radio
argue
antennas that they're trying to set up to do
those poor
science stuff.
pilots, they just like flew to Mars and then just were stuck. They're gone. That's it.
it's a lot of chaos going on, and I like to think if this is a focus on the reality stone and the chaos of reality around us, when we actually rely and ground ourselves with our loved ones and our friends, we're able to overcome whatever chaos that reality throws at us, which makes a bit more semblance of the story.
It's a nice way to put it. I don't know if I don't think they were thinking that deep.
I was going to say, I don't think anyone buys that was what they were going for,
I
but
don't think so.
Oh, not at all. No.
I like that you think that way.
Yeah. That was good, Anton. Yeah.
I do appreciate that you think that way. I don't think anyone on any one of the six screenwriters.
yeah, they weren't.
They didn't get that pep talk. No.
Yeah.
They needed. They could have used it.
Toys.
Yeah, they could
Sell
have used
toys.
someone.
Anything to add before we wrap this up? We talked about Natalie Portman. We talked about the studio meddling. We talked about the weak sauce villain and the confusing plot. And then we talked about the production. Let's bring this home.
Let's do it.
Dennis, as the guest, would you like to go first?
Again, it was long story short, copy Thor 1, paste Thor the Dark World. You got from the opening to the big bad security guard, what was it, the destroyer and the cursed, the worlds, the ice world, the fairy world, the elves. It's just a lot of copy paste elements, but it worked in the first one. It worked even better in the second one. We stated some reasons why we think it could have worked better, but we don't make movies. So, it is what it is. That's really what I think. It's not very enjoyable for me to watch, but I guess a lot of people do enjoy it. So there's that.
And what letter grade would you give this film?
Overall letter grade, I would give this film a C, even, average C.
Okay. It's not that bad.
No, I'm probably with the Rotten Tomatoes because I like the visuals weren't the action scenes I thought were good. The CGI was actually pretty good with a lot of the spaceship stuff, the destroying of Asgard. Visually, not the worst. Although I didn't like the darkness, especially towards the end, where it's just kind of what's going on. A lot of you can't see it. Again, part of the point of the movie, The Dark World, is to be dark, I guess, but
You're saying that you would call this Thor bad cinematography?
Exactly. Thank you, Pat. That's what I was thinking. Send that note to the directors or the six screenwriters.
Anton, is it my turn or yours?
I think it's your turn.
Okay. Really quick before I forget, because we joked about this in the first episode, Loki is a frost giant who can freeze people to death, and that's just never, ever brought up again.
Nope.
Could have been useful here maybe at some point, but...
How did I forget?
Everyone forgets it.
Thank you, Pat.
He's a frost giant. Anyway, did I like this film? No. But I don't hate it. I don't think it's horrible. I texted Garrett about this, as I mentioned. Here's what he had to say. Quote, as a movie, it was clearly made by committee. Alan Taylor was a hired gun. The villain is a waste. And this is when cracks actually started showing for the first time in Marvel. End quote. I just wanted to include that here because I really liked the way Garrett summarized this. I feel the same. This is one of the most skippable films in the MCU. Hemsworth and Hiddleston are magnificent, and they do make this movie worth watching. I think their chemistry is great, and all of their scenes together are very entertaining. There's chuckles here and there, but it is pretty much a waste of time. It's very inconsequential, as you said, Anton. All it does is exist to set up one of the Infinity Stones, although you don't know that at the time unless you're a Marvel head. The action's pretty pedestrian. It's fine. We talked about how dull the movie looks. The music's fine. Again, it's just a watered down version of the score from the first Thor, which I really liked. Like I said, it's not horrible. It doesn't do anything egregious. There's some gems in here. There's good moments. It's not too long. I was able to sit through it. It's just forgettable. If I hadn't taken so many notes on it, I would be really struggling to remember a lot of the things in this film, even the things that I liked. They didn't put a lot of thought into the plot, and the villain is just a nothing burger. I don't think it's the worst MCU film. We've talked about how I haven't watched anything post Endgame except for Black Widow. But if I were ranking the MCU, this would be low on the list. Of everything that I've seen, I would probably put it ahead of Incredible Hulk and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. It's not horrible, but it is dipping into that territory of badness because of how forgettable it is. And for that, I give this a D+.
I feel like execution is key when it comes to a film like this. We've talked about like Placeholder, we've talked about it's a stepping stone film, and there's nothing wrong with those kinds of films. Those kind of films can be really fun. We've seen a few of those films throughout the MCU. We get it with The Dark World, arguably Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I feel like what really separates certain films is like within that category is how do we define inconsequential? How do we define compelling? And because of the execution in the film, really doesn't result in major changes for the characters or the character development in a way that felt like you got that across the board, is why I feel like this film is a lot more forgettable. Sure, you get that character development a bit with Thor and Loki, but you ask yourself then why have the whole thing with Jane? Why even have that be an aspect to really focus on in the film, which really drags and bogs it down. But because there's some really strong chemistry in there with Loki and really great bits from, again, the template that they had from the first film, I really like the way that you put that, Dennis, that the film was, it was serviceable. It was fine. It was just, again, really falls more into that stepping stone territory of let's have Marvel content to get us through to the next movie, into the next big movie. And I feel like there's a lot of potential here for this film to have been much better, which we touched on. I feel like it shouldn't be necessarily considered the worst MCU film. It does end up on those lists a lot, among the worst. But I think it would just kind of more falls into that cavern of average. And for me, I have to just kind of put this at a C-.
That's where I thought you were going with this. I was like, he's not going to give this above a C-. Dennis walked away, but we'd like to thank him for his efforts to join the podcast. Guess we'll give him a minute.
Yes, we will.
Dennis, you're back.
Sorry.
No problem.
I had to run over to the restroom for a second.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Dennis, thank you so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And it's always fun to chit chat about some movies. I look forward to joining you guys next time. And I will be on time. I promise.
Oh, you weren't that late. It's no big deal.
No, I'm gonna be late again.
Hopefully, it'll take less than 60 episodes to get you back.
Yes, I'm gonna make some requests. We have a lot of movies that we think could have been better, and for more reasons than you can imagine. So
yeah, I think our current list is 736 films long. It's just growing all the time, so we're not going to run out of content. But that is it for Thor: The Dark World. Tune in next week when we return to the wonderful world of James Bond. Anton, it's going to be the 50th anniversary of the man with the golden gun.
Let's have some fun.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No one can catch him. No hitman can match him.
I look forward to listening. Thank you again for having me, guys.
Thank you,
Great
Dennis.
to catch up.
All right, well, we'll see you all next week. Take care. Thanks for listening to Why Wasn't It Better? If you've made it this far, it's safe to assume that you like what you hear. If you have not already done so, please hit that subscribe button and become a follower wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you really like what you hear, you can contribute to our podcast monetarily and sign up for our Patreon. So whether you're commuting, chilling at home, or embarking on a nostalgia-fueled movie adventure, make Why Wasn't It Better your go-to podcast companion.